Hello, this is Margaret Ajibade. I'm the STEM Positive Disruptor. And today on Mia's conversation, I've got a special guest, Sarah Chapman, and she's an application engineering manager with 3M. And also, she's an advocate for ensuring that we have diversity within the STEM world. So we're going to talk more about that. But the reason why we set up this platform, we want to be able to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to demystify and change people's perception about what STEM is. That's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's bringing the public into our domain, but also to show the diverse roles. And for example, Sarah is an application manager, and we want to be her to explain more about that, but also the other areas of her passion and her interest as well, to just cover those as well. And also, we also want to start a conversation between the industry, education system, as well as the public, and the government as well, because government is so important, because policies needs to be made as well, so we can make it inclusive. It's not about a preference, it's about ensuring that we have a fair impression across the board where STEM is concerned. So without further ado, welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on board. I'm quite impressed with what you've done. I'm also quite impressed that you've won quite a few accolades. It's just so many of them, but you tell us more about it, because I do want to celebrate you, and I do also want to celebrate the work you're doing behind the scenes as well. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Margaret. It's lovely to be here, and yeah, I think it's, everything you said at the beginning, this is so important, because we need, if we're going to have new technologies, they need to be representative. If we just have a section of the population developing them, then we're not gonna really all benefit from them. So I kind of, that's the reason I do a lot of the STEM advocacy work that I do, because I really want to make sure that we've got diversity in STEM, not just because we know, and all the research shows that we get better ideas that way, but also because then it's more representative, and it's going to serve a wider group. So yeah, I feel really strongly about it. And it's interesting for me, because I never saw myself going into science or engineering or anything like that. So I kind of have a personal story that motivates me, because I want to make sure that other people have more diverse role models, and that they can, if they consider, if they're creative or collaborative, or good with ideas, then they see STEM as something they can do, rather than, I think, some of the stereotypes that we have around, you've got to be really good at maths, or you've got to be some kind of genius. So yeah, that's why I do what I do, and I'm really happy to be here, and I love the work that you're doing with showcasing different role models and their stories.
Well, thank you so much. I'm quite impressed. I'm quite intrigued about you saying how you started off, because you started off in chemistry, and then I sort of you evolved. But how did you get into that zone? Because you talked about your story, the reason why your drivers has been stemmed from when you started off as well. So can you please expand very briefly how that came about?
Yeah. So it's a strange story, but I think it's one that's actually quite common. A lot of people say, they didn't plan their careers, they didn't plan their jobs, and for me that was very much the case. So I was all set to be a dancer. I was studying ballet, I was training like every day when I was a teenager, and that was my thing. And it was interesting, because everybody would say, oh, you're a natural dancer, but nobody ever said to me, you're a natural scientist. It just didn't, I don't know, I looked like a dancer, and that's what people thought. So I think it I kind of had this perception from the beginning that science, technology, engineering, maths was so far away from the stuff I was doing, that then, thinking about that as a career, it wasn't that I had necessarily a negative perception of it, I just didn't identify with it at all.
Cool.
So then, to kind of cut a long story short, the ballet career, that didn't materialize, and I lost my way a little bit when that happened. I think, like a lot of people, especially at that age, I was looking for identity, and I think I didn't really know what to do. And my parents were quite sensible, and they said, look, just stay in education, stay at college, go to college, pick something you enjoy, or it doesn't matter too much what you do, but stay in education. And obviously that was great advice. And as a parent now, that I can kind of see why they wanted me to do that. But I was, I guess, a bit out of defiance. I picked chemistry because I kind of just, I think I have a vague recollection that my dad said to me about it being a difficult subject. which is a perception for sure. And I was like, right, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna show that I can do something different. So it was a really kind of not really a great reason to go into something.
Hey, it's a reason though.
Yeah, but it was what happened. And so, and actually it was only when I was in chemistry class, and I was aware by then there was definitely a gender difference. There were more boys than girls in chemistry, and certainly in the maths and the physics classes.
Yeah.
There was definitely a split there. I didn't take maths or physics, but a lot of the people in my chemistry class, they were doing all the sciences and maths. I actually regretted that, and later on I had to teach myself maths to get into university, but that's another story. So I'm there in this little chemistry class, and I actually changed my A-levels, so I was doing French and drama and English to kind of support the dancing, and then I changed to biology, geography and chemistry, and it was, I still wasn't enjoying it. I was doing it out of defiance. And then this teacher, she told us how she used to be a formulation chemist, and she used to work for a very well-known cordial company, and they used chemistry to control the acidity and the sweetness of the cordial because the fruit harvest varied. And I know it sounds really silly because it's quite a small thing in life, but it just blew my mind, because I was like, oh, that's why we have science. That is engineering. That is using those STEM skills to actually solve a problem that everybody can relate to.
Of course. And
it totally changed my perception. And then from then I kind of just started to fall in love with science and technology and engineering. I wouldn't say I fell in love with maths, but maths is a necessary skill for some of those areas. So I did then kind of catch up on my maths study. So yeah, that was kind of what happened, and I started with chemistry, but then even I went to university to study chemistry degree, and even there I felt like a bit of a fake. I've kind of felt like that the whole time, really. I was just like, what am I doing here? Why did I even pick chemistry? And I enjoyed bits of it, but other bits I found quite challenging, and so then I kind of realized that I didn't want to work in a lab. And again, these stereotypes come in. So I was like, oh, if I don't want to work in a lab, then why am I doing chemistry, and what am I going to do with it? And had I known how many jobs and opportunities would come from studying that subject, there's like millions of these jobs, and they're not all in the lab. Some of them, like right now I work with a lab, but I don't work in a lab. There's all these jobs, and I didn't realize that at the time, so I was a bit worried. I remember my somebody at university said, you won't make it if you don't do a master's or a PhD, and I didn't. I wanted to start earning. I wanted to get into industry. And then long story short, but eventually I ended up at 3M, who basically apply science to life. So it's kind of been the perfect job in that regard. And it just went from there, really. So yeah, sorry, that was a long version.
But no, but that's really amazing. And you know what you did point out, and I think this is where most people struggle as well, is that because sometimes we get so bogged down by the things that we can't do, by the things that we do, or the things that we enjoy and things we don't enjoy. And that can be a separation with those who stick through it and those who won't. Because you mentioned about you going back and learning maths yourself. And that's kind of a big thing, because this is where most people struggle, saying, oh, maths is too hard, it's this and that. But what is it though? That's the question, because if you can do it, you can do it. And also you made mention about not knowing the different roles within the industry where chemistry is concerned. And I think this is where we're struggling as well. The public don't know that. And this is one of the reasons why this platform has been set up. We want to showcase the different roles itself. So now come back to where you are with 3M as an application engineering manager. What do you do? Because again, this is something that some may aspire to want to do.
So again, that's the kind of job I had no idea existed until I got it, really. So I've had a variety of jobs at 3M. They've all been technical jobs. I started off, my chemistry background kind of led into a regulatory job. So those white masks that everyone's so familiar with. So you get face masks, but then you also get what we call respirators. So they are designed to actually protect you, the wearer, from hazards in the air. So those kind of respirators, you can get valved versions. You've probably seen on the news and things, especially with pandemic healthcare. Workers are wearing a lot more of those things, or have been for the last couple of years. So I actually started off in that area, and that was important because there's a lot of materials science, there's a lot of there's quite a lot of data analysis and things in those kind of jobs, and those kind of products, you don't just make them and then sell them. No, they have to be tested, they have to be quality controlled, they have to be in this case they were CE marked. So I started off coordinating all the CE marking, which is now CA marking. But yeah, so it was a good sort of 15 years ago that I started doing that. But it was fascinating, and it was a really good way to apply a technical background and technical skills, but the job was really about communication and teamwork, and in some cases creativity. So that was a really interesting learning for me, because I didn't know that those jobs really existed. I thought that STEM jobs were all about graph paper and data input and analysis, and you know, and I definitely use the thinking that you learn in any STEM degree, the you know, the kind of the logical thinking, but actually the role is I mean, super varied. So that was really good. So I started doing that, and then I, for the same product, started doing a role which we call application engineering. So that's all about helping our customers to use those products properly. Some of them are quite technical, particularly, you know, in this case, if you have sort of powered air systems, you know, that have fans and motors and things, they can be quite technical. So our job as application engineers is to go to customers, often quite large industrial customers, and to work with them to help them, A, choose the right product, B, choose something that their staff are going to wear that's going to be comfortable, that's going to fit them, because if products like that don't fit, then they don't work. So, you know, that kind of thing. And actually, it was a really people-oriented job. Again, surprising, different to what I had in my sort of stereotypes mind. So yeah, I did that for a while, and then that kind of led longer term. I did a bit of project management and that sort of thing, and then longer term, as I progressed, I'm now in charge of a team of application engineers in a different business. So we work at the moment, I'm working in the tapes and adhesives business. And again, this is amazing. You probably don't know how many things are stuck together. Like if you think about joining two materials, you probably think about welding, about rivets. Actually, so many things are stuck together with tape. And you know, you kind of wouldn't believe it, actually, how many, you know, if you go on a plane, then floors and seat covers and panels, even exterior panels, they're stuck on. And you know, we've got record breaking strength adhesives. We have these sort of industrial strength tapes and adhesives. So my role as a manager is to basically to work with the teams that are actually going out to the customers to help them choose the right tape, test the product to make sure that it's going to meet their needs, and then also provide the technical data that goes with that, because a lot of these tapes and adhesives are now used, the customers will be doing simulations and things like that, so they'll need data to input into their modeling. So that's what my team does, and it's fantastic because I get to work with engineers. I'm not an engineer myself, not a qualified engineer, but I get to work with engineers, and engineering is all about problem solving. So yeah, again, it's quite people oriented, but it's also technical.
But you know, but if you think about it, just because we are engineers or scientists or technologists or whatever, we still have to deal with people. And I think for some reason we think it's, when we think about technical roles, we think about just machinery, which is not true. And you know, you talked about communication. You've been, because I said technically you have to be able to communicate that to the different people you deal with all the time. Yeah. So all of these things, although we take it for granted, we should need to showcase that so that people come in, or people who have no idea, or the public who do not have an idea, can actually appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of imagine, don't we, an engineer in their shed, or a scientist kind of on their own with a fume cupboard, with a lab coat, and you know, and it's just, obviously there are roles like that, but of course the vast majority of roles, like you say, that they're people oriented, they're working in teams. Communication is one of the most valuable skills. Creativity, you know, anything that involves problem solving involves a level of creative thinking. And I think we kind of say there's arts and then there's science, and there's not. I mean, there's loads of jobs that use both.
100%. And you know, and that's something that I really want us to be able to showcase. And you know, I can talk about that a lot, but I think what you have done is demonstrated what is possible. You came with an idea. in a way, it's like you're trying to challenge your dad. Well, Dad, you said I can't do it. I should, I can do it. But it's okay. We all do things because sometimes our drivers are driven by other people's perception of how they see us. And therefore we say, well, if you think so, you watch me. Watch this space,
Exactly.
basically.
Exactly. And I think we need more, we need people to have the confidence to do that, because otherwise we won't get more diversity. We'll just get, people who see somebody who's like them, and then they will follow them. And actually it's the case in all industries. If you want to drive diversity, which we know is good for decision making, we know it's good for innovation. It does require following a slightly different path, and sometimes you have to make your own new path. Exactly. And that is difficult. I think it's certainly not easy, but I'm hopeful that some of the work that we're doing, and some of the role models that you're showcasing, that just gives more opportunity for people to see somebody who's like them in some way, and then think, well, if they did that, albeit maybe I won't follow exactly the same path, but maybe I could do that. Maybe I could forge and do something a bit different. And it's and certainly in STEM, I mean, so I always say this, like you say, we think of STEM and we think of certain sort of technical stereotypes, and actually I think STEM is a really good way to follow a passion. So if you're really interested in something like music, but maybe you're not going to be the front person in a band, you could still travel the world with gigs by being a sound engineer.
Exactly.
Just one example. So
exactly, yeah,
it doesn't have to be something that's kind of set. Actually, there's STEM jobs in almost every industry.
100%. And that's the reason why we want to educate. We want to show what is possible and what is out there, the diverse roles itself. And this leads me on to you talked about diversity. You've won quite a few awards. Was it Involved Future Leader? You've so many of them. I can write, but I am proud of it, and I applaud you and I celebrate it, because again, you're driven by your need, your passion to bring change. Change means that you yourself change. For you to change something else, you yourself have to be the changer. You have to be the difference amongst other people itself. And I was just reading through some of your background. You talked about there were 3 ways to inspire change or diversity, and you talked about stories, stars, and streetlights. Very briefly, because we only got half an hour, and I want to really get as much as that off you. Well, what does that mean? How do you translate that in a practical term?
Yeah, so that was when I did a TEDx talk, because I wanted to try and reach a wider audience, and which it certainly does. That's a great platform for that. And in that talk, I talk about how we need to tell stories, and we need to have 2 different types of role model. So we absolutely need stars, and we need to tell their stories. So in my head, stars are people, I mentioned a few of them in the talk, but stars are people who are at the very top of their game. They're the ones who kind of smash the glass ceilings, and they're the first woman CEO, or the first Black representative of something, whatever it is, right? And they're amazing, and they're people who you have to have so much respect for people who have done something like that, because that's not been easy. And that's amazing. But the challenge that I still have is when we showcase those stories, often they're people who are, if you think about somebody like I was, sort of teenage aspiring ballerina, I'm probably not going to be able to relate to somebody who's the first CEO of whatever technical company, right? I'm probably going to really struggle there, because they're so far ahead, they're so high up and shiny. Sure. And that's amazing. And the stories are still inspirational, but they're not very relatable. So I think what we need as well is what I call the streetlights. So the streetlights are the parents and the teachers and the friends and family and mentors and role models who we're showcasing, who might not be in the kind of the mainstream media, but they are people whose stories are just as inspirational. Of course. And their challenges are just a lot more relatable. So, I can think of hundreds. If I had to fill a sky with all these stars and streetlights, there'd be hundreds of people who have inspired me in different ways. And none of them are exactly, they're not like, I'm not kind of going, oh, there's a person, I'll follow their path. But if you look in the different aspects, I've kind of got, I've got mentors for lots of different things. So that's really what I think we need to do. And I actually think everybody can do that. I don't think it just needs to be people working in STEM. No. I think you know, you could be a grandparent taking a child out for a walk, and you start pointing out to them some of the amazing STEM stuff in nature, you know, some of the symmetry in leaves, for example.
Sure.
Or maybe you're baking and, you know, you look at how chocolate melts. You know, you don't really need to know how that happens.
No.
You just have to point out that it's science, you know, that's physics. And I think everybody can do that to help bring some of these stories and really make science, really bring science to life. And try to showcase that science is for everybody, and it does affect everybody because it is all around us. So yeah, that's my talk. I won't do that. I won't do the whole talk again. You can watch it on YouTube.
But you know, but the thing is, this is an observed audience as well, so it's always important to maybe showcase that. But you know, you made a good point, because everyone has a story, everyone can make that difference, and I think in a way, it's about getting a dialogue started as well, because sometimes, even though we have parents and the public, not everyone understands the dynamics, because yes, we know this is science or that. Not everyone can showcase that, but if we can, in a way, raise that profile, raise that and expose them to that, and it gives them a different perspective. It also helps them where the young people are concerned, or just people who are looking for a way out, or looking for a future for themselves, but they don't know where to go. As you mentioned, you started off, you wanted to be a ballerina, and it didn't work out as you loved it to. And then your dad said, well, but you got, that triggered you. You didn't know why, and you felt uncomfortable in some cases, but at least you tried. And you know, you mentioned sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone in order to see whether or not this is a path for you or not. But if we were just really quickly, how would you bring change in the sense of getting the government, the industry, and the education system to work together to make a change? Just give us 2 or 3 practical, or even 1, it doesn't matter, practical translation of what we're talking about diversity, because diversity is all relative to how you perceive diversity as. But I think it's important for us to start from a point where, if we start from a very early age, we can then integrate it. And the way we have things right now is because that's how it's always been. But we want to change that, because it's now a different kind of world that we live in than maybe 50 years ago, or even 25 years ago. And that's what we're trying to do, bring us to that place where we are now, where there's that makeup of people that can make a difference in whatever industry they want to go to. So if you
so I think obviously it's a big challenge, and there's no kind of one, I don't think there's a silver bullet that can kind of just fix it. You know, we have seen improvement, you know, the numbers are improving, but women in particular are still underrepresented, and there's so many groups who really just are not, they don't see that science is for them. So the number one thing that I think everybody can do, I think, you know, the general public, I think education providers, I think the government can help with, you know, schemes like the STEM ambassadors and some of those schemes, is just to try to connect science with real life, with everyday life. Because at the moment, there's still this perception that you have to be a genius. You know, there's 3M does a survey, it's an independent survey that we commission every year. And this State of Science Index, one of the questions that we look at is the public's perception of science. And there is still, unfortunately, a stereotype that persists that you have to be a genius. And we think of, you know, amazing doctors and, you know, people who are expert and really good at maths and this kind of thing. And obviously that those people exist and they're important and we should celebrate them. But actually there's a lot of people working in STEM who don't identify with that, and they bring other qualities. So I think if we can just try to relate science to everyday life a bit more, then I think more people will see it as something they can be part of. And I think a few ways to do that, you know, so anything around role models is good. Anything about sharing those diverse stories from people from more diverse backgrounds, I think is critical. I think also for particularly at a young age, you know, those stereotypes, those occupational stereotypes are formed very early. So I think the more people that we can expose people to who have maybe a background that's different, or have followed a different path, or who do a job that people can relate to, that's a STEM job, I think the more of that we can do, the better. And I think there's a role for a lot of different organizations there, particularly I think really any corporate, any company, any organization that uses STEM skills they have a vested interest to do this, right? Because we've got this huge STEM skills gap. It costs the UK on average something like £1.5 billion a year. So, businesses are struggling to recruit STEM qualified or STEM skilled candidates. So it's in their interest to try to use diversity to bridge that gap. So I think trying to, any company that uses STEM skills, trying to explain how you use them, trying to make some of those jobs and bridge the gap between education and industry, education and employment, because I think that's where we see that there's a lot missing. So I think everybody can do that, and to help with that. I think also in education itself, again, this, there are some perceptions there about maths and science particularly. Again, trying to really show how they're applied in industry to make them more relevant, to make them more interesting, to make them more applicable and more relevant to a wider range of people. So that's probably where I certainly what I try and do, and I know, Margaret, it's what you try to do too. So I think if we keep doing that, but we need more people. It's a challenge. I always think this when I go into schools. Sometimes I'll go into a school and there'll be a bunch of, some kids who have been labelled like gifted, talented, or they're basically already into science. And with respect, those kids are probably going to go on to study STEM anyway. So I try and focus my work around the more underrepresented groups, people like me when I was thinking about ballet, who might just never have seen themselves in a STEM career. So I think trying to do that if we can, and I think obviously corporates like mine play a role in that, but then also there's some amazing organisations who are funding schemes, and there's voluntary schemes where people are trying to do that.
So what about the government? Do you think the government has a role to play, and the media as well? Because it's about communicating now. Unless, how can we get to the public unless you're exposed to something? So do you think the government also has a role to play?
Yeah. So I think it has to, and actually, if you look at some of the ambitions that this government and previous governments have had, if we're going to achieve some of those things, then we need STEM skills. We need them for economic growth. So I think absolutely the government have a role to play. I think the question is, how can we do that most effectively? And I've seen some great schemes. I've seen some great collaborations. Businesses like mine often want to do that outreach work. So then I think maybe the government role is more around coordinating that and making sure that then reaches into the parts of education where it needs to reach. So yeah, I think it's a big challenge, and I think if you look at something like STEM ambassadors or the work that STEM Learning are doing, a lot of that is about matching, it's about bridging that gap, rather than necessarily that, although they also provide STEM outreach, but I think it's more about bridging the gap. So yeah, I think there's plenty more to do, although we're making progress.
Yes, we have to celebrate the progress, the steps we've taken forward, because we can't. It's not about identifying or looking at the problems and looking about how can we improve on what we have, but keeping the momentum going as well. And and this is something you're talking about. I do love what you've done. I do love what you're doing. I also like your idea and your vision as well, and how you're making impact and headways as well in your environment, but also beyond that as well. And without your awards as well, being an outstanding STEM ambassador, being a future leader, so many things about you I just admire. There are going to be young people, even it doesn't have to be young people of different ages, that will look at you and say, wow, if she can do it, and she started off wanting to be a dancer, and now look at her now. And the fact, and now you're beginning to enjoy what you do as well. I think that's so important, because you started off not on show, but now you have that confidence, and you say, hold on a minute, I want to include you. I want to make it more inclusive. I want to challenge the norm and bring a change. And that's what, to me, that's wonderful, because you have lots of people who talk a lot but don't do anything about it. But you are you walk the talk.
I do try. But what's really important there is also about then inspiring other people, because so my work has changed over the years. When I first came out of university, I was obviously a lot closer in age when I went to schools to talk. So now what I try and do is really about trying to inspire other people to do kind of STEM ambassador type things, to do outreach, to share their stories. And it's so easy these days. You can for example, you can go onto Career Village and answer a few questions in half an hour of your time. You don't have to go anywhere near a school, and yet then that's going to be seen by thousands of students worldwide. There are some, you know, that's just one, but there are loads of resources like this. So I think technology is making it easier. You don't have to necessarily be a full-blown STEM volunteer, and I guess that's what my hope is that, you know, and that's what some of those, you know, some of those awards, that, you know, that's nice, and it's, you know, it's, I'm really honored to have them, but at the end of the day, I hope that my example inspires other people to then share their stories, because if we just share one or two stories, we're not going to change it. We need to have that huge diversity and that huge range. So yeah, that's my hope, and I think in that regard, this podcast is it gets my thumbs up.
Oh, well, thank you. But you know what? You are an inspiration. You are a wonderful leader, and I love that you want to give back, and you're already doing that, and that's, you know, to me, I appreciate people like you, because, you know, we don't always celebrate those people who are making those inroads and making a difference in the environment, and you are, and I thank you so much for coming on board. And I can talk with you. But I know you're busy. I also want to make people to listen to you. So
it's been my pleasure.
thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate what you've done. I really appreciate you as an inspiration to me, as well as to other people who will listen to you as well, and also to young people coming as well, because your journey is just wonderful to listen to. So again, thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And if I can inspire a few people to be the street lights, then
I think you do more than street lights. You've been into the stars as well.
Oh,
like we all, because, you know, we start some. We all, even those that are now stars or reach the pinnacle, or you know, they started somewhere. So
exactly.
who said? So
Yeah.
we all have to start somewhere, and that's the whole thing. We have a journey, and it's how you fulfill those journeys. So
exactly. And they've all had struggles. You know, that those stories we you know, you asked about the media, actually. You know, I think the media can help by sharing more of the stories, you know, more
Indeed.
of the background for people,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to look at somebody and, you know, and think, oh, well, I could never do what they do, because they're obviously really special because they got to, you know, a certain level. And actually, at the end of the day, a lot of it is about discovering what's unique about you, and then how that fits. And I think, you know, what added value it can bring, you know, even if it doesn't fit classically, even if it doesn't fit in the way you might think. So yeah, it's I think it's fantastic, and I think the more people we can feature, then the better.
The better, indeed. Well, thank you again. Anyway, thank you so much. Again, thank you.
You're so welcome.
No problem. This is Margaret Ajibade again, the STEM Positive Disruptor. Again, the reason why we have this platform is to educate and raise awareness, change people's perception, and demystify what STEM is. That's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It's showing the diverse roles within the industry. It's about bringing change, getting a dialogue going between everybody, getting the public to see what we do, and then to encourage more people to think about STEM, especially young people, that STEM is fun. And STEM is changing lives. It's everywhere you look, STEM has impacted us in some way or the other. So again, I want to thank my special guest, Sarah. Thank you so much. I am so proud of you, and you're an inspiration. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.